expecting that is not on yet? Cindy or Jim?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Looks like we're looking at somebody's email.
My email, thank you.
Okay, well, we have everyone present, so let's go ahead and get started. We will call the Johnston City Council meeting number 20-19 to order. Cindy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cope.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Betty.
Here.
Soroka.
Here.
I will read the COVID-19 statement. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with Governor Reynolds' March 19, 2020 proclamation, suspending the regulatory provisions of Iowa Code Section 21.8 or any other statute imposing a requirement to hold a public meeting or hearing, the City of Johnston will conduct meetings electronically with the public allowed to attend per instructions denoted on the meeting's particular agenda. Meeting minutes will continue to be posted for the city's normal course of business. So with that, we will move on to the discussion items. And the first discussion item this evening is a presentation on the State of Iowa Certified Local Government Program for the purpose of historic preservation.
And I will explain that item. We have a couple of guests with us this evening, John Brown, who's with the Johnston Historical Society, and Paula Moore, who's with the State Historic Association. And so John approached me, I'm probably over a year ago, about the possibility of setting up a certified local government in Johnston. And what this is for, it's to address historic preservation of our within Johnston. We do have a historic society, but the historic society is really a private not-for-profit that their primary purpose is to maintain records of historic value to the community. A historic preservation commission is like another board or commission that we would have with the city, in that they are appointed by the mayor and city council, and they are advisory to the mayor and city council, but their focus is on identifying and having or maintaining our historical structures and within the communities. So that one of the main purposes, as I understand it, is that as Historic Preservation Commission does have the ability to apply for grants, especially from the state of Iowa or from the national government for historic preservation, whereas the Historic Society doesn't have that ability. So that's one of the values of having creating a certified local government and working on our historical preservation. So with that, John and Paula, we're going to join us this afternoon to talk about what this is all about. Paula heads up the program for the State Historical Society for those certified local governments. So she's very knowledgeable in how the program is set up and work. And I think most of you know John. He was very active last year with the 50-year anniversary programs that we did, and has been very active with the Johnston Historical Society. So Paula or John, do you guys want to go ahead?
Yes, John Brown, I'll start. I'm on the board of the Johnston Historical Society and its president. I'm also the longest serving member on the State Historic Society of Iowa Board of Trustees that advises the Department of Cultural Affairs on historical issues. And Iowa has a very strong certified local government program, and we noticed that when we started work a couple years ago on saving the powerhouse along the old interurban railway route, that Johnston was not a certified local government and could not get state grants through that program. And so we decided that we would try to, as a society, encourage the city to meet the requirements of the certified local government program, so that you would have that expertise available to you and that source of grant revenue. And Paula is, she's the architectural historian and certified local governments coordinator for the state of Iowa, and she'll go over the basics of that program. I think she's on.
I do not show her on.
Okay, maybe she was unable to get in. Okay, I'll go ahead and try to cover it. She, of course, is the expert on this. We have a phenomenal number of counties and cities in Iowa that are certified local governments. And we have grant money that the state receives every year through the National Park Service that is given out to these certified local government programs. And the State Historic Society of Iowa Board of Trustees decides who gets those grants. And so in order to be eligible for this program, you have to have a historic preservation commission. And this commission has to receive some annual training. It has to meet, I think, 3 times a year. It has to have at least 3 members who should have some expertise in historic preservation, like an architect or someone like that, or a historian. And they, in addition to helping the city qualify as a certified local government, they also can advise the city on issues of historic preservation. Now, some cities go a little further and create historic preservation districts and require certain standards to be met for new construction, and we're not proposing anything like that. This would be an advisory commission that, among other things, would do an inventory of older buildings like 50 years or more in Johnston that have historical significance, so that we would have those identified as the city has now reached its 50th year and has some structures older than that, and would serve as a resource for the city on historic preservation issues. So Paula had a presentation, which I don't have, and she must not have been able to get into the Zoom meeting. So the ask here is that the city would take the steps to create this commission. You would put a notice out for people that are interested in being on the commission. You would pick 3 people at least 3 to be on the commission, and they would complete the requirements for the city to be certified as a certified local government with the state. So any questions from anyone?
John, I have a couple of questions. This is Paula Dierenfeld.
Mm-hmm.
I don't very often have to identify myself by my last name because so few people have the same first name. But so, is there a specific process that is detailed somewhere in Iowa Code or someplace else that someone follows to make a request for designation as a historic preservation? I mean, what either designating a something within our community as historic, or is there a specific process in terms of receiving grant monies? I mean, how much of what this commission does is prescribed?
Yeah, and it's set out in these the materials that were provided, and it tells the steps that you go through to become a certified local government, and the historic preservation people at the State Museum downtown will help you with that and make sure that you meet all the requirements. Then it does have to have an approval by the National Park Service, although that's usually automatic because the state makes sure you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And then once you have that all set up, then when you apply for certified local government grants, and in most years there's money to fund about half of those, and you write up a grant and they have a request. They have a standard form for that, and those there is a committee that the Department of Cultural Affairs has that makes recommendations about which grant applications are awarded, but it's actually the Board of Trustees of the State Historic Society of Iowa that make the final decision. And then the grants are doled out in accordance with those decisions. And then this commission has to meet 3 times a year. It would have records of its meeting. It would do things like receive annual training, do a survey of historic properties in the city, and maintain that from time to time. And that's basically it. But Paula has done a really, Moore has done a really good job of outlining all the steps in the materials that are on the state's website that I think Jim has included in your materials tonight.
Jim, this might be a question for you, but it does require some staff support from the city. Who would you, how would you propose that we handle that? And do we have the capacity to do it?
Well, and to be honest with you, that's probably my biggest concern about taking on another project right now is that, having the staff resources to be able to work with this. When you look at the documents, it says, it talks about what the staff is to do. I mean, they're supposed to coordinate the activities of the committee. My guess is the staff would also write grants and those kinds of things. So there is a staff commitment. It doesn't align real well with some of what our other staff do as far as departments. But that's really my main concern. I think doing this makes a lot of sense. I think identifying our historic resources in our community and doing what we can to get funding to make sure that we're able to protect those resources. I really think that that's an important part. And again, my only hesitation is the amount of staff time that may be required, because if you think about it, we're also looking at the climate change, which requires staff time. We've taken on the Kosovo issues, which requires staff time, and we keep getting more and more things to do, but not really expanding our staff resources. And so that's my only concern. I think this is a great proposal and something we should really consider. I just haven't figured out how the staff function happens at this point.
Yeah. John, you've been on the state board for some time. Can you give us some suggestions, ideas of other similarly situated communities, maybe of the same size, same staffing, who does this and it seems to work well and it doesn't seem to be too overly burdensome for the city staff?
Paula Moore would of course know that, but I don't know. I haven't gone over a list of what similar cities have gotten. I know some of the suburbs are participating and some are not. A lot of our grants are that we've given out on this program, or the state has, are outside of the Des Moines area.
Well, Jim, this is on the work session tonight, so you're not expecting any decisions on this, correct?
No, it's really just to present the information to the council, and if there's some direction that the council would like to give us, or if there's any indication of whether this is something of interest to the council, that would be helpful so we can keep moving forward. There's a number of steps that have to happen for us to be identified as a certified local government. There's an ordinance needs to be passed and those kinds of things. So, so it'd be helpful if the council has some idea or some direction, and then we can start moving towards that direction.
Well, I'll briefly share my thought. I think that this sounds like a really worthwhile endeavor. We do have some historic facilities, sites in Johnston, and we want to make sure that they are protected. And if there's a way to access some grant dollars to help in the preservation and protection of them, I think we should take advantage of that. I do share Jim's concern about the staffing, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves about that. If we go this direction, make sure that that we don't make a half a commitment by not providing the staffing support that this commission is going to need. We need to be all in if we do it, but we need to understand what that means. So I think we have some more research to do, some more understanding of just what this would require, and then I guess we'll bring it back at another date for some more discussion and decision making. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes.
What do others think?
I just have a quick question, Mayor. Will this mean the current historical society then disbands? And my next question is, I don't know this, but does the current historical society own anything in terms of property? Uh, uh, and that's just something I just wondered about. Thank you.
This John, I think I can answer that. This John Brown. No, this really has a different function than the Historic Society, which tries to preserve, protect, and promote preservation of history in Johnston. And so I think the Historical Society members and board would help a lot with this, maybe even provide a few, volunteers for the commission, but they would be separate and both would coexist. The Historical Society owns the Simpson House, and they raised $250,000 20 years ago and moved the house in the barn there and restored it with a lot of volunteer work. And there's an agreement with the city whereby the house can continue to be there on city land, and the Historical Society basically gave the barn to the city to use as an event center as long as it's used for that purpose. And so there was kind of a unique arrangement set up 20 years ago with the city and the Historical Society. And they maintain the Simpson House Museum and do various other projects to preserve and promote local history.
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in and just sort of say that I do have some concerns about staff kind of bandwidth on this. I think, and I really compliment the work that the Historical Society has done here in Johnston. I think it's vitally important, and our city comprehensive plan does a great job of highlighting the city's history, and there's a lot of stuff that we need to embrace. My concern is that I think as a council, we have a lot of things that we really want to be as priorities, whether it be some of the things that have been talked about already, a broadband or whatever. I think the upcoming strategic planning process that we've got will give us an opportunity to sort of sort through issues like this and others, to sort of, take 5 issues or 10 issues and say, these are things we'd really like to do, and figure out of those 10 things, what are the 4 or 5 that we really have the resources to do all the way, or I'm not sure exactly what the term the mayor used, all in or whatever. But I think you can't, if you're going to do it, if you're going to do it right, you have to be able to truly commit to it all in. And I have some real concerns about whether we can continue to ask our staff to go all in on all these things and really expect that to be able to be done. So I just think we have to be honest with ourselves, and hopefully the strategic planning process might give us an opportunity, or if that's not the right venue, some other venue down the road, to have an honest discussion about whether we can really pursue this.
Right. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Well, I think as Council Member Cope, this is Jim Sanders, mentioned, and I think that's a good point. We have our strategic planning session coming up, and actually, there were, again, these sort of, particularly when we're talking about the climate change as well, which is going to be a staff commitment. I was going to actually put those on the questionnaire that we do, so that that'll be before the council to talk about what our priorities are and what we should be spending our resources. So I think it's perfect timing, because we're going to meet in a couple of weeks on the strategic plan, and so I think presenting this proposal tonight is just perfect timing for us to take this and think about it a little bit more and provide the details for the council to have that discussion as far as priorities.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I apologize that Paula wasn't able to get into the meeting, but Paula Moore, and she would have had a lot probably better explanations than I have. And so, but I appreciate your time tonight.
It appears we may have lost the mayor.
I'm back.
We're back, okay.
You did lose me, but I'm back. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to item B. Is that correct?
Yeah, and John, thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll hopefully have another time where Paula can help us understand what's being proposed. So thank you very much.
Thanks, John. So moving on to item 4B, the 2022 through 2025 through 2026 capital improvement plan discussion. And I'm guessing that's probably Teresa.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. We have started, the department directors and staff have started working through the capital improvements plan for the next 5 years. And this year we changed our capital improvement planning software. And so you'll see different reports. We'll kind of talk through those as we go. A couple just minor things to notice right away is that projects have been given a priority level, 1 through 5, critical through future consideration. And additionally, if a brand new project was added to the CIP that the council has not ever really talked about before, under the project number, which happens to be in the example Cindy has on the page, she just highlighted it. If we've put an asterisk up, the first 2 things are an asterisk, it's a project that was never really in the CIP before. This particular example, we know that the trestle to trestle bridge is a project you guys have been talking about, but guess what? It was never in the CIP. And at this point, it looks like it might cost us anywhere between $370,000 to $570,000, depending on where we fall out with Polk County. So we've been adding back in those projects. And normally I'm going to give you reports that are just a 6-year scope, but I wanted to show you that we actually can go 10 years and that when we're putting in projects, we're trying to strategically think further than the 5 years, but fiscally planning for those 10 years, it's really hard. It's a little easier to when we're talking about the 5 to 6 years. And the other key piece of advice that I've been talking about with the department directors, and I've talked about with the council itself, is that we really want to start structuring our new debt issuances, specifically our general obligation debt issuances, so that we're not issuing any more general obligation debt, which is paid for by the debt service levy or property taxes. I really think the city needs to start working hard at not issuing any more debt than we're paying off a year. We've had several years where we're issuing more debt than we're paying off, which is understandable, folks. I'm not criticizing. We've been a growing city. It's hard to do in a not growing city to do that. But we've had to, as you know, structure debt where we're end loading and we're paying more principal at the end versus interest and those types of things. But I just want us to think about and recognize the amount of debt we pay off each year versus the amount of debt we take on, and then what our valuation is continuing to grow. So in the staff report that I provided for you, I did list out for you, I think the next 6, 7, 8, 9 years, those amounts, that's the amount of principal general obligation debt we're going to be paying off in the next several years. So one of the key discussions that we had internally as staff had to do with the timing of the east of Merle Hay, north of 62nd projects, and how we were going to time those and how we were going to start with the public meetings and how we were going to phase in those projects. And we've built those in over several years as we've stretched this out. So that's kind of a global view of what we've been working on. Please know that the Public Works Committee met and talked briefly about the Public Works projects. The Parks and the Parks Board and Tree Board talks about the parks projects. The Stormwater Committee will talk about the stormwater projects. And then there's additional projects that are in there that we call general, which include like our fiber optic project. It includes any big pieces of equipment that the fire department may be purchasing. If there happens to be a project that was either for the fire or police department or the library. So there is a general tab, and I imagine we'll be going over those with the Finance Budget Committee. The Finance Budget Committee, as a side note, has had 2 meetings so far as we've begun working through budgets with departments. So things are clicking along in the finance area. And tonight, what I've provided for you is a summary of the projects for the Parks Department and the Roads Department. Cindy, if you just want to open that first project or that first tab for me, excuse me, the first PDF for me. That is the summary. And I'll let John and then Matt talk through the projects that we have out. And again, you can see the ones that are new to us are those first 5 or 6 that John has listed that have those asterisks. The one that is a little bit different, what is a little different now is that if we have moved a project around, it might be hard for you to tell, but it's going to be up to us as staff to remind you that this was a new project, or we've moved this project out, or we've delayed a project. We'll be telling you that. But if anything's been added or taken out of the plan, we're going to tell you that specifically so that you don't have any surprises. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk through your department's projects.
Teresa, before John starts, may I just make a comment? Teresa already mentioned the priority number there, and now that the chart is up, you can see where the priority number is now added. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are the 5 numbers that are designated there. And Teresa, just remind us, I think it was in your staff report, but what those numbers really mean.
1 is critical, 2 is very important, 3 is important, 4 is less important, and 5 is future consideration.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right.
Excuse me, John. And so you, counsel, if you think the priorities should be different than what staff has thought, you need to tell us that. Okay, John.
Yeah,
sorry
and one thing I'll add to that, Teresa, is obviously staff prioritize this based on other projects within their department, not automatically based on priority of overall projects. So when you look at the parks, this is based on priority order in conjunction with other parks projects. I'm not comparing it to road projects or to the fire truck or anything like that. I'm trying to just focus on this. So
that's true.
I'll try to go through
and all
this fairly
departments
quick.
are doing that.
I will try to go through this fairly quick. I know we don't have a huge amount of time, but starting off with the new projects, I don't think I need to talk too much about the trestle bridge. I think everybody's been in the loop with that. We did move that project up into this year. I really doubt that the construction actually begins in this fiscal year. I'm not positive that they're going to get that design concept out there quick enough to get bid and project moving forward, but certainly we would want to have some funds available up front for that project. Moving down the Ignite Public Park Improvement, as we talked through this project with the Parks Board, it became very apparent as we looked at the timeline of the Ignite construction that right now we're looking at probably, I'm guessing the spring of 22, that project will be for the most part completed. It would look fairly barren if we didn't move our parks component along with that project fairly close to the same time schedule. If we just had graded land that wasn't developed or usable, I think that it would look a little bit odd. The direction that the park board wanted doesn't automatically have to be done at the same time as that, but it should be fairly close so that within a 6-month to 12-month period of time, the entire project site looks like it's complete. down below that, Johnston Drive Trail. This is actually in conjunction with the senior housing that is occurring up along Johnston Drive up near actually interurban trail. One of the components of that project is that they are looking at a requirement to put in a 5-foot sidewalk. The request is that instead of a 5-foot sidewalk, that the city pays the difference and constructs a 10-foot trail from the interurban to the west back to Merle Hay. So this funding allows for that cost difference in there. We're still waiting for more accurate numbers with that, but wanted to put a fairly close placeholder in there to make sure that we had that there. By the way, if you have any questions about any of these projects, please feel free to interrupt me. Ridgedale Heights Park improvement. This is the area, just as a reminder, up along 100th and 70th, just north of the high school. It's moving forward quite fast. I think within a few years, couple years, we are going to have the need for parkland area for those residents. There's really nothing else up in that area for those residents. I considered moving it to 22-23, but when I looked at all of our numbers and everything, it made more sense to start that development in 23-24. Right now, looking for more or less trails, sidewalks within the park, playground, and shelters as the main focus, maybe a basketball court as well. Looking at fairly standard park development within that area. The next one is kind of an early placeholder. Currently, we have funds in the project for a trail along 86 from 62nd to 54th, so going south. This would create a trail going north from 62nd to 70th. We don't have any kind of trail connection between those two. That $350,000 does not represent construction. It would be the initial design of that project. Johnston Commons, we're starting to move forward. I think we have confirmation from our small committee that we have a playground design selected, so that's going to start moving forward. In fact, you'll potentially see those purchase orders next council meeting. And then in 23-24, that represents a water feature in that park. Trail along 86 will be bid later this fall. In fact, the November, I believe, 2nd council meeting, we plan on coming to the work session to show you that design concept for that trail. Water trail construction for next year, that $700,000 represents project in and around the Merle Hay area. Once again, we're looking at those different potential sites for that. Lou Clarkson master plan and additions. You can see that spread over the course of 4 years. That represents really 4 different things. It involves the design of the softball complex, construction within the softball complex. There's a few small needs of Little League as far as bleachers and new fences, and then some static development to the east part of the new purchase land that would be more like disc golf and some shelter type areas. Dewey Park improvements. This is the first project that we shifted back once again to kind of make room for some of these other things that moved forward. We're still okay for another year with Dewey Park, but this represents restroom, shelter, and playground reconstructions in that area. Complete renovation of Crown Point. This very well may be one of them that we discuss at our goal setting. But this Crown Point Community Center will have to be a bond referendum, and the size of that, Jim and I have spoken quite a bit about this. It probably needs to be tied to another project and not stand on its own. North Park Development Annexed area. This is another one that backed off a year. Right now, we don't see the development happening as quick out there, and certainly things with COVID have pushed some of that area back. So I don't foresee that there will be a need for a park out there in the next couple of years. Cross-country soft trail development, this actually got pushed back 2 years. Reason for that is the high school just actually designed and constructed their own cross-country course that will be opening up here soon. The need for this is a little bit more long-term, potentially. We'll continue to mow the trails back there, but the actual development of this is something we can push off. Crosshaven second shelter, this also got pushed off a year and may end up getting pushed off more. Right now, the usage of Crosshaven has not warranted a second shelter out there like we thought it would, but we'll continue to watch that. Adventure Ridge Restroom is the next one. This is one we've had some conversations with the neighborhood. They are lukewarm. Nobody's against a restroom, but they're also not pushing for it. So it's out in your fiscal year 24 there. Dog Park, this is one that I believe actually got shifted up a little bit. This is in conjunction with that senior housing I spoke that the Johnston Trail is. They are dedicating some land up along Racialized Park that we would be able to develop a dog park. This $50,000 would help in that development. Terra Lake Canoe Kayak Docks and ramps, that's for year 22, 23 for $50,000. Another one we backed off a little bit, Terra Park Storage Building, that was actually scheduled for next year. Right now, without having canoes and kayaks and not knowing what the future of having our own versus continuing to have a rental group come in. So I backed that off without the knowledge of that. Park sign replacement. We have hopefully designs here within a couple weeks of what the new park signs. Basically, this is replacing the 3 or 4 different style park signs we currently have around the community. And then the development of Crosshaven East Park, that's out in 25, 26. I think I backed that off 1 year just to open up some more money within the region. So any questions with that?
Hey, John, this is Suresh. Thank you for that. It's really good. Quick question. So the priority says, the first one, well, the second one, Ignite Public Parks Improvements, priority says 2, but the construction happens in 21, 22. So the priority is in 21, 22?
Yeah, the priority number 2 is still 21, 22. It can have a priority of higher and be future years. I based these on a couple of things. One's basically if it's a safety issue. If it's a major safety issue, then we need to have that as the highest priority. 2s are important to the point that it's important with other developments around that area. It coincides with something that's being developed there, so that's why that took a 2. 3 is really important. Don't get me wrong, 3s are important, but they're not critical to other things happening within the developed area. Okay. And then you can slide that scale down. So that's kind of where I judged the numbers from. Okay. Safety all the way down to not important.
Right. Actually, my question was a little bit different. I was asking the priority that you have set for each of this park development, and that priority is in that fiscal year, right?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay, that's all I asked. Thank you.
I was wondering, could you just remind me where the North Park development, is that a specific spot or is that just generally somewhere in the annexed area?
It's just somewhere in the annexed area. We haven't, I haven't talked to Dave Lording enough. I don't think there's anything out there yet that's absolutely designated as parkland. As developers come in and look at housing developments, that's when we start looking at where the parkland should be.
Great.
I know that's coming sooner or later. That's why it's there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then just one other question I had on the Dewey Park improvements. I mean, I guess it's more just as that gets going, would love if we could consider putting in a wheelchair swing. I know that'd been requested by a few folks. So If there's any way to look at that as plans shape up, that'd be much appreciated.
We will look at that. We were going to do that at Greenwood Hills. Unfortunately, we were warned by all the manufacturers of those that those have to be standalone, isolated, and in many cases, they strongly suggest that they're fenced in with a lock, and that people that want to use it come get a key. They said over and over again, they're having kids go in there and messing around with them because of the weight of them, they're really hurting other kids. So if they are standalone, they said that the number of accidents with those types of swings are 10 times more than any other swing that they sell because of the weight of them.
Oh, interesting. That's good to know.
We were all ready to pull the trigger up at Greenwood Hills, and then we got warned over and over again by manufacturers of think this through fully. So we slowed down with that one.
No, got it. Grimes might have some ideas on how to handle that because I believe they have a wheelchair swinger too. So it might be worth investigating with them, see if they have any ideas.
Yep.
John, this is Councilwoman Martin. Also at Dewey Park, the trail there is in pretty poor shape. Does that come in a different budget?
That would most likely come in the trail overlay, the trail maintenance overlay. That's part of the general operating that we put money towards each year. We don't have.
Did we lose him?
Sounds like.
Okay. What he was saying, Rhonda, is they have 30 to 50 to some odd $1,000 a year in their regular budget to do trail maintenance. So that must be where he's going to talk about that.
Okay, I figured that was the case. I just wanted to verify it. Thanks.
Yep.
Hey, since we got a break from John, Teresa, I actually have a couple questions for you real quick.
Sure.
So what is kind of the timetable for the CIP? Will we have a public hearing at some point?
We do.
Do you know what the date of that's going to be?
And you know what, Tom, I don't have my budget calendar in front of me, but I have it on the budget calendar, which is in board docs. So I'll check between meetings. But typically I try to have the CIP public hearing in December. So December, maybe January, but I'll double check and let you know at the first part of the meeting.
Perfect.
Teresa, this is Matt. On your budget, you've got it, council finalize and adopts proposed CIP December 7th.
Okay, so that's my goal, Tom.
Okay. Second question, you started off the presentation by talking about the concept of not issuing more debt each year that we pay off. And typically it looks like we pay off somewhere between $6 and $7 million a year. Correct. And one of the challenges with the CIP budget is that if you look at projects, if you say you want to issue no more than $7 million of debt in a year, that doesn't necessarily equate to $7 million in projects, correct?
That's correct, right. And I'll have for you a financing report as well. I can give you that at any time. I haven't given you that yet. So far, we're actually looking pretty good with what department directors have been working on to meet this goal.
Okay, yeah, because I think that's the CIP is different. I mean, I've been doing this 9 years and I still struggle with it. So basically, you can, so it'd be helpful to be able to sort of figure out if you're gonna issue $7 million in debt, that lets you do. Here's how much, in essence, value of projects you can do.
Sure.
Result in issuing more than 7 million, whatever that factor is, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
I apologize to everybody. I'm back. I'm not sure what happened. I lost everything briefly.
Well, actually, that's perfect timing, because then my other question, or this sort of, there really isn't a question, but one of the projects that is on John's list, the Lou Clarkson improvements, I just want to put on my Johnston Girls Softball Association hat. I'm a member of that board. My daughter Harper plays on a travel and rec program for JGSA, and we've got $2.2 million over 4 years in for that master plan improvements. that's a really important project for lots of different things. It's going to help bring water and electricity over to the 4 softball fields that are located to the east of the main entry point there, which will allow those fields to be better maintained, and also will bring permanent restrooms to those facilities, which you may kind of wonder, okay, what's the big deal there? But I will tell you, we have a lot of 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls who play softball on those fields, as well as their parents and grandparents who today can only use a porta potty. And let me, that's just not, it's not the right, it's not appropriate. It's not the right way to handle and show off Johnston. We have lots of, you'd be amazed how many people come to Johnston each weekend for a softball or baseball tournaments. We have softball tournaments almost every weekend throughout the month of September and October at those fields. And so this will allow for really important improvements there. It'll also allow for the disc golf, and it'll also add parking, which will help with the new kayak launch that's also going in at that location, because on a weekend, those parking lots will fill up very much with cars there for a softball or baseball tournaments. And so that additional parking will help alleviate that. So this is a project that I'm really excited about. And I know, and you'll likely hear from some other folks from JGSA and Little League as well, really appreciative of the investments that the city's making on that project. So really, and I also want to salute John and his team and the folks at Schneider and Associates. They've been very good to work with on that whole project.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other parks questions before I have Matt Greiner talk about his? Okay, Matt?
Unmute myself here. All right, I'm going to cover the first 2 projects. We opened the roads projects here. The 2 projects would be the Merle Hay East improvements. If you can see at the end of there where it says P-1 and P-2, what we typically had in our CIP prior to this year was just one line that basically had all of the phases and lumped together as a total. What I've gone and done is broken these down into the individual phases. There is 9 phases north of 62nd, east of Merle Hay to construct. So they started at roughly about $5 million and they worked their way down to roughly about $2 million over those 9 years. These 2 projects were slated for a couple of years out. We did push with COVID. We did lose this year, and some funding discussions that we did have out another year or 2. But with that, it takes about, on the south part, we went through about 18 months, almost 2 years of discussions and planning process, meeting with the neighborhoods and having those discussions. So this will allow us to get some of those discussions started, and then we can get into those design process and then acquisition and construction from there. So really the process will begin in late FY22, early FY23, have those discussions, and then really kick off design in FY25. Moving down to the Northwest 54th Avenue road diet, you'll see the 2 asterisks in front of the project number. This really isn't a new discussion, but it is the first time this has showed up in the CIP. I was recently contacted and had a request to do something at this intersection. So it is programmed in our CIP now, based off of the earlier discussions and the engineer's estimate that Snyder and Associates had provided. Moving down is our sidewalk funds. Currently our sidewalk funds in FY20, we're doing 3 projects with them. Part of them are being utilized on the Northwest 62nd Avenue and Merle Hay intersection project. It will put sidewalk in from 54th to Beaver Drive. It's also being currently designed, the Windsor Parkway, which will get us from 86th Street to Northwest 92nd. It'll fill those gaps where we don't have any development at the moment, which really serve Horizon Elementary as well as Summit Middle School. And then we are looking at replacing sidewalk ramps that are currently out of compliance in the original Green Meadows. Moving on into the Merle Hay East improvements south of Northwest 62nd. These projects, this is our last year. We're wrapping up construction on the east of Merle Hay, south of 62nd project. That's been, it's actually gone fairly quick. If everybody remembers when we started this process, roughly about 8 years ago, almost 10 years ago. So that'll be wrapping up this year. Moving on to Northwest 62nd Avenue. This would be from 54th down to Beaver Drive. This would be where our current project will end. We've got roughly 500,000 in design, 300,000. We'll have some acquisition to widen that road out, and then construction would happen that following year. Northwest 107th Street from 70th to 78th Avenue is programmed for a asphalt overlay. This would be a joint project with Grimes, as we both share about approximately 50% of that roadway. 100th Street, 70th to the city limits. We've had quite a few requests lately to get some pedestrian connection along that stretch with the growth that we've had in that area with Crosshaven and a few other developments that have gone out there. This would likely get a urban standard road with curb and gutter versus the current rural section, along with pedestrian connection, whether that be sidewalk or trail through that area. Moving on, there's the Northwest 54th Avenue reconstruction that is currently in phase 1 this year. Phase 2 will continue through next year. 100th Street reconstruction. This would be from 54th up to 62nd. Currently, this is a rural roadway. We would look at standardizing this. This is kind of the last segment between 54th and 62nd. Urbandale to the south has put in the interstate ramp, which has really raised the vehicle traffic on this roadway. We did just put in a bypass, or to get through the intersection, some turn lanes at that intersection. I'll get completed this week so that we can get through there. But this would most likely be 4 lanes with a trail on the east side, and it would make the connection between the 2 4-lane segments that are there. This is also, a portion of this would be shared with Grimes. They have a little bit of that southeast corner of this roadway. One thing that we're looking at doing, it's an awfully big construction number out there in FY24 of $10 million. Likely what we may look at doing, Windsor Parkway may be a natural break, and we may end up phasing this construction. We'll know a little bit more once we get into design in the next year. That end up may breaking that $10 million into 2 $5 million projects, or 6 or $4 million projects that we can spread out a little bit. The next one is currently under construction, which is the Northwest 62nd Avenue and Merle Hay intersection. And then the one underneath that, which doesn't have asterisks in front of it, I left those out, but it's a new project there at Merle Hay and Johnston Drive to update that intersection and construct a roadway to the west back into the Ignite site and the city park. I think that wraps up the CIP. I tried to.
Matt, did you skip over Northwest Beaver Drive overlay on purpose?
No, I'm sorry. Northwest Beaver Drive overlay is currently in design. We've got another work session item on it a little bit later, and it is slated for construction beginning next year.
That's why I wasn't sure if you were saving it till the next discussion.
No, I just was sliding down my page here and missed it.
Okay.
Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Matt?
Matt, this is Councilman Cope. Just kind of a couple of quick thoughts on a couple of your projects there. On the 54th Road Diet project, just my kind of 2 cents on that. I think there's two elements to that project. I think one, which is vital, which is some sort of crossing of 54th Avenue at where the entrance to the school district and also the entrance into Lou Clarkson Park. I think we need some sort of lighted crossing there. And so I think that part of that project is really important. I think the other part of the project of where 54th and Foxborough comes together, narrowing down 54th there, eliminating that lane, I really don't think there's a lot of value in that part of it. So just kind of want to plant that seed that I would encourage us to review whether because that can be the sort of the more pricier part than just putting in the crossing. I think the crossing is the most important. So just kind of wanted to share that with you. Second of all, on 100th Street, I've also been contacted by some folks from Crosshaven who are really wanting to see a trail from Crosshaven down to 70th Avenue. So glad to hear that that's something that's being in the mix as part of that project, because I think that's really important.
Yeah, we've had a couple of calls here as well to get that put in there. It would connect that northwest area down to our new trails that we just have constructed on 70th.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other
It'll- It will be our intention to amend the the TIF 6th district to include the right-of-way for that 100th Street, so that we have those TIF funds to pay for that public improvement. So know that that will be coming here in a year or two.
Anything else on the budget, Teresa?
I don't have anything else. I don't know if anyone else had any questions.
Any other questions, Melissa? If not, let's move forward and take up at least item D, the Northwest Beaver Drive overlay, Merle Hay Road to Northwest 66th Avenue overhead utilities relocation to underground. We do have a member of the public who wanted to hear that discussion, and she let us know that at the outset of the meeting. So let's go ahead and handle that item.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking tonight for a little bit of, have some discussion and a little bit of direction from the full council on some of the issues that were discovered during the design of the overlay and the trail project. So just to give a quick background, there will be a overlay of Beaver Drive between Merle Hay and 66th Avenue. There is also slated to be a 10-foot wide recreational trail on the north side of Beaver Drive. And on that, there's existing private utilities through that project corridor, which will require relocation. Currently, the electric kind of runs down the south side of the road from Merle Hay until you get just east of 70th. And once you get east of 70th and Beaver Drive, it switches over and goes to the north side. So with that, there was utility coordination back in late December of 2019. The initial assessment by Mid-Am was that the electric facilities may need to remain overhead because the majority of the private property electrical services being connected via overhead lines via service poles. Late in April 2020, Mid-Am proposed that the overhead electric lines remain on the north side, which raised some concerns after the engineers really looked into it with the trail that was being placed back at the edge of the right-of-way line that was proposed. With that, there would be additional impacts on trees along the frontage of those properties. So looking at that overhead location and doing the evaluation on that project, the proposed location for the city's right-of-way would require trimming of any tree canopy on private property within 10 feet. But the additional impact on the north side would total about 57 trees over 14 properties that would be impacted. And those are primarily by trimming of the project. Associated is a right-of-way acquisition, which has already resulted in 30 trees over 7 properties requiring removal. On the north side, tree removals have been a sensitive topic with the residents out there. And that's why it was determined that the south side of Northwest Beaver Drive be looked at for the level of tree impacts if the overhead was going to be relocated to the south side. And what that looks like is or results in about 36 trees over 10 properties that would be impacted by trimming if the electric was moved over. Given the lesser tree impact, the south side of Beaver Drive, Mid-Am reached out to some residents to discuss willingness for this option and see what was best for their users. Relocation on the south side of Beaver Drive wasn't dictated to Mid-American by the city or Green. Rather, it was presented as an option to see what tree impacts or constraints at certain areas where utility poles couldn't be located at the edge of the property would be. There is a third option, and that would be the transition to underground. We have reached out to Mid-American and got a price for that installation from overhead to underground, and it roughly is about $470,000 plus utility costs. So it's roughly right around $500,000 is what's estimated to cost difference to put that from overhead to underground. There is continuing conversations with Mid-Am to understand what those impacts to residents would be in respect to location of easements and tree impacts, as well as the overhead service connections. So with that, if you have an overhead service connection currently that runs up a pole, that would likely stay. So if you do, as indicated here, kind of on the drawing right in the middle of the page, where you see the dot on the south side, then there's a dot on the north side and it runs into that house. That's a service pole on the north side and it has overhead electric that runs into that property. So if we take this underground, we're still not going to get rid of all the poles, but you'll get rid of the majority of the poles. And with our latest storm up there, we did have some downed trees and some, the one thing we didn't lose was power along Beaver Drive by a tree being downed on it. We did lose it due to a transformer being struck by lightning. I know a side road such as Coburn Lane did have a tree on those power lines. So kind of in closing, we've got the relocation of overhead electric infrastructure at the city's right of way. Does prove problematic if it is on the north side, and it could have some potential intrusion on utility poles that are required for that clear zone. Also, the property owners are sensitive to the loss of trees already, and we haven't closed on all of those properties, so that we feel that that may adversely impact some of those negotiations. Relocation of the overhead electric infrastructure to the south side does have a lesser degree of tree impacts, but it is a change for those property owners on the south side as well. And there has been concerns vocalized to, I know there's been some to the city council as well as here at Public Works. We'll continue to explore options to relocate infrastructure in the best interest of the city and the adjacent residents. We did have this discussion at the ad hoc committee last Friday, and there was support for placing that electric overhead to underground. One of the things that was asked was, would Mid-Am be able to provide some cost share in that? I did make that request Friday afternoon when I met with the Mid-Am representative on another project. I have not heard back from them at this time, just reaching out to see if that would even be a possibility, but would be interested in seeing what council thought of that. Now, the one thing is the $500,000 to take that from overhead to underground is not currently budgeted in the project. So we would have to up that budget, and before Teresa says it, she's already told us that's not in the budget. Is that correct, Teresa?
That is correct.
So there was some discussion that, this is an important connection piece between 66th and Merle Hay. We all know that the trail north of Merle Hay along Beaver Drive gets heavily utilized. This would connect this into more regional trail. There was some talk about would it be appropriate to maybe use some of these sidewalk funds to construct the trail and move some of the funds out of the project to relocate the utilities. So those were the discussions that were had at the ad hoc committee meeting, and anybody else that was at that meeting, if they want to share any thoughts, I would be welcome those. Or if any other council members have any other questions, would answer those now too.
Man, I think you've done a really nice job of backgrounding what the issue is, as well as what our discussion was at the ad hoc committee meeting. We did lean towards the underground approach on the south side, primarily because it reduces the impact to trees. Obviously on the north side, if you move it to the south side, as well as on the south side, if you put it underground, as opposed to keeping them overhead. I mean, we have a lot of trees along there, and I know that the residents feel very strongly about the trees that they have. And we did talk about the fact that it's not in the budget, and that we would probably have to look at using one of our year's worth of sidewalk dollars, program dollars, to pay for it. But the thought was that this is a major roadway. If we could get Mid-Am to share in some of that cost, that would be ideal. We've heard, in more recent times that Mid-Am is, more inclined to put electric lines underground than they used to be. They see the value in that, particularly if you have it in an area where you have a lot of trees and the trimming over time, or the damage that can be caused by storms. So we did want to bring it back to the full council for others' thoughts on it as well. But the direction that we were leaning was let's put it underground if we can make that happen. And if Mid-Am will share in the cost of that, that would be ideal.
This is Councilman Cope. I'm not on the Public Works Committee. I support the idea of going underground because I think it's sort of a real challenge to figure out the north and the south side. But my only concern is the proposed source of funds of taking it out of the sidewalk fund. I just want to remind everybody that sidewalk proposal was made when Dave Cubitt was the Public Works Director. And on the pace that we're going of robbing money out of the sidewalk fund, Matt Greiner will have retired before we ever start this program. And so I think we have to go underground. I think that's probably the best option, but I'm adamantly opposed to taking money out of the sidewalk fund. I walk around my neighborhood and I trip, or I come very close to tripping on sidewalks all the time. We have put off that sidewalk fund year after year. I believe there are city staff that look for opportunities to take money out of that fund each year. And I am adamantly opposed to taking it out. Somebody has to stand up for that fund, and it's going to be me. But I really believe we can find the money someplace else. Teresa earlier kind of indicated that she felt like we were, doing a pretty good job under the $7 million. I just think we need to find some other source. It's very frustrating to me that we continue to talk about sidewalks and how important they are in Johnston, and we continue to raid from that fund. So I think it's really frustrating, obviously frustrating for me that we want to take money out of that fund. I think we need to do the underground, but we need to find a different funding source.
I'm just going to comment and thanks Matt for all the hard work on this. I received a number of phone calls, people stopping at the end of my driveway, and the consensus up in that area is that they do want to go underground. They understand the impact, but if there's any way that we can make it happen, that I think I'm totally supporting that.
So I think with, if there's no other comments, I think we'll move forward at looking possibly how to fund that if there is a cost share, and start talks with. I know I have a meeting with Mid-Am on Wednesday about this topic, so we'll go from there unless there's any other direction that we don't want to go underground.
Any other thoughts from council in terms of the question of whether or not we go underground?
I think underground is good. Appreciate that.
And I just have one comment. I mean, I agree with everything being underground and stuff. This might be a dumb idea, but one thing that I'd noticed is when we were going through the CIP earlier, I think it was the Northwest 86 trail that's slotted to begin construction this fiscal year was about $1.7 million or so. I didn't know if that was something that could be broken out over 2 years, and maybe that would be like a way to help keep things within budget, but also not raid the sidewalk fund. That might be impossible, but I just throw that out there. That's one thing I noticed in it.
We'll have to, I don't want to commit any John's funds, so we'll circle the wagons. We'll get back together and see what we can do.
You know, you'll give it your best effort, Matt and Teresa. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, what time is it? Looking for a clock here on my computer and I'm not seeing one. 7:13. Can we do the other item in just 2 minutes or less, Dave?
No, I think it'd be better at the end of the agenda.
Okay, so let's go ahead then and adjourn the Johnston City Council work session, and we'll all dial in for the regular meeting. Thanks, everyone.